What if I told you that around 1200 BC, a mysterious army of warriors nearly wiped out every major civilization in the known world? They crushed empires that had stood for centuries, brought entire societies to their knees, and left behind such devastation that we call it the collapse of the Bronze Age. And here's the truly chilling part: we barely know who they were. The Egyptians called them the Sea Peoples, and when they finally reached Egypt's doorstep, it fell to one pharaoh to stop them before civilization itself was extinguished. This is the story of humanity's closest brush with total collapse. And trust me, it's absolutely gripping. Right. Let's set the scene properly, because you need to understand just how terrifying these Sea Peoples actually were. Around 1200 BC, the Mediterranean world was thriving. You had the mighty Hittite Empire controlling vast territories in Anatolia, the Mycenaeans dominating Greece, the Minoans with their sophisticated palace culture. These were advanced Bronze Age civilizations with armies, trade networks, and centuries of accumulated wealth and knowledge. They seemed untouchable, permanent fixtures of the ancient world. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, everything started falling apart. Cities were burned to the ground, trade routes collapsed, entire kingdoms simply vanished from history. And at the center of this apocalypse, a mysterious coalition of warriors the Egyptians dubbed the Sea Peoples. We only know about them from surviving Egyptian hieroglyphs, which describe the absolute horrors they unleashed on the civilized world. Think about that. For a moment, these people were so devastating that scribes centuries ago felt compelled to warn future generations about what had happened. Now, who exactly were the Sea Peoples? That's where things get properly mysterious. They weren't a single unified group, but rather a coalition of different peoples. The Shurdan, the Weshesh, the Peleset, and the Shek. Where they came from remains hotly debated by historians to this day. Some theories suggest they were displaced populations fleeing climate catastrophe or famine. Others reckon they were opportunistic raiders, capitalizing on the weakening of established powers. What we do know for certain is that they moved like a plague across the ancient world, leaving destruction in their wake. By the time they reached Egypt, they'd already accomplished the impossible. The Hittite Empire, one of the superpowers of the Bronze Age, had fallen. The Mycenaean civilization that gave us the legends of Troy and Odysseus, gone. The sophisticated Minoan culture, wiped out. These weren't minor kingdoms we're talking about. These were civilizations that had dominated the Mediterranean for centuries, and the Sea Peoples had torn through them like a hot knife through butter. The entire Bronze Age system was collapsing, and Egypt was next on the menu. Enter Ramesses III, the pharaoh who would either save Egypt or watch it burn. Unlike the rulers of the Hittites and Mycenaeans, Ramesses had one crucial advantage: time. He knew they were coming. Reports of the devastation sweeping across the Mediterranean had reached Egypt, and Ramesses understood that if he didn't prepare properly, his kingdom would suffer the same fate as all the others. But here's the problem. Egypt was already in trouble. With all the neighboring kingdoms destroyed, trade had completely dried up. The Egyptian economy was struggling, and the empire was diminishing even before the Sea Peoples arrived. Not exactly ideal circumstances for facing an existential threat. Ramesses gathered an army of about 12,000 men. Now, here's where he made a genuinely brilliant tactical decision that would prove crucial. Among his forces, he incorporated mercenaries from the Shurdan, one of the groups that made up the Sea Peoples themselves. Think about the strategic genius of this. He's essentially recruiting warriors who know exactly how the enemy fights, who understand their tactics, their strengths, their weaknesses. It's like having defectors who can tell you everything about your opponent's playbook. Along with the Shurdan mercenaries, he assembled Nubian spear guard units. These are elite troops, known for their ferocity in battle, and his own Pharaoh guard, the absolute best warriors Egypt could field. The Egyptian forces moved to intercept the Sea Peoples at the border, determined to stop them before they can penetrate deeper into Egyptian territory. The Sea Peoples, flushed with victory after victory, are eager for more conquests. They've toppled empire after empire, and they probably reckon Egypt will be just another notch on their belt. They couldn't be more wrong, but they don't know that yet. Ramesses advances his troops and makes contact with the Sea People's army. The pharaoh brings his archers forward, and Egyptian archers are no joke. These men can put an arrow through a man at considerable distance, and they're about to make that very clear. As soon as the archers begin loosing their volleys, the response is immediate and overwhelming. Around 13,000 Sea People's warriors surge forward like a tidal wave. descending on the Egyptian army with a ferocity that's destroyed every army they've faced so far. The main Egyptian infantry line takes the full brunt of this assault. Can you imagine standing in that line, watching thousands of warriors who've never lost a battle charging straight at you? The Sea Peoples fight with a brutality that's legendary, and the Egyptians are quickly learning why every other civilization has fallen before them. Meanwhile, a unit of about 800 Shekelesh warriors attempts a flanking maneuver around the Egyptian left. Ramesses spots this immediately and shifts one of his units to counter the threat. The man's not just a figurehead, he's actively commanding his army, making tactical decisions in real time. In the center left, the battle becomes absolutely ferocious. More units collide along a battle line that stretches for 2-kilometer stats over a mile of men locked in deadly combat. The Sea Peoples are living up to their terrifying reputation, inflicting heavy casualties on the Egyptians. Those archers Ramesses deployed are doing serious work, raining arrows down on the enemy forces with devastating effect. Constant archery barrage. On the left flank, the detached Egyptian unit finally makes contact with the flanking Shekelesh warriors, preventing them from rolling up the Egyptian line. Now, remember those shrewd mercenaries in the elite Pharaoh's guard that Ramesses incorporated into his army. He's been holding them in reserve, waiting for the critical moment. And that moment arrives when the center of the Egyptian line begins to crumble under the sheer weight of the Sea People's assault. The line is buckling. Men are falling back. And if it breaks completely, the entire Egyptian army could collapse into a rout. This is the moment that will determine whether Egypt survives or becomes another victim of the Sea People's rampage. Ramesses commits his reserves. The shrewd mercenaries warriors who fight in the same brutal style as the Sea Peoples. Because they're literally from the same coalition slam into the enemy. And this is where the Pharaoh's tactical brilliance pays off. The decision to incorporate his enemy's troops into his own army is now saving his main battle line from complete collapse. These shrewd warriors know exactly how to fight their former allies, and they're turning that knowledge against them. It's absolutely masterful. At the same time, Ramesses sends his Nubian elite spearmen to repel the enemy on the left flank. These Nubians are among the finest warriors in the ancient world, and they're about to prove why. The Pharaoh's guard also advances towards the center, and a unit of Egyptian infantry held in reserve moves to threaten the enemy on the right. Suddenly, the Sea Peoples find themselves in serious trouble. The Weshesh warlord, who'd been pushing hard on the Egyptian right, is now being surrounded. On the left flank, the Nubians are encircling the Shekelesh warriors. The Luka general, commanding the Sea People's center, tries desperately to keep his forces together. But here's the problem: his warriors are exhausted. They've been fighting for hours in the blazing Egyptian sun, and despite their fearsome reputation, they're still human. Both sides have lost considerable numbers of men. The battlefield is littered with the dead and dying. The Sea Peoples, who've never faced defeat, are now staring at the very real possibility of being destroyed. And then it happens. The Sea Peoples begin to retreat. These warriors who brought down empires, who crushed the Hittites and Mycenaeans, who ended the Bronze Age itself, they're retreating from the field. Ramesses III has done the impossible. He's defeated the undefeatable. But let's be clear about something: this isn't a crushing victory. Ramesses wins, yes, but only by the narrowest of margins. His casualties are substantial. His army is battered and exhausted. If the battle had gone on much longer, the outcome could have been very different. This isn't some glorious triumph where the Egyptians routed the enemy with minimal losses. This is a hard-fought, desperate struggle for survival where Ramesses managed to eke out a victory through superior tactics, clever use of reserves, and sheer determination. The significance of this battle cannot be overstated. If Ramesses had lost, Egyptian civilization, one of the longest-lasting and most influential cultures in human history, would likely have collapsed along with all the others. The knowledge, art, architecture, and written records of Egypt would have been lost. We wouldn't have the pyramids, the Sphinx, the incredible wealth of Egyptian literature and science that influenced Greek and Roman civilization. The entire trajectory of Western civilization would have been fundamentally different. But Ramesses held the line. He stopped the Sea Peoples at Egypt's borders. And whilst they remained a threat for years afterward, they never achieved the kind of devastating victories they'd won elsewhere. Egypt survived, became a bulwark against the chaos engulfing the Mediterranean, and eventually helped to rebuild the ancient world from the ashes of the Bronze Age collapse. The tactical lessons from this battle are fascinating. Ramesses' decision to recruit shrewd mercenaries was genuinely innovative, using enemy defectors who understood your opponent's fighting style. His use of reserves, waiting for the critical moment to commit his best troops rather than throwing everything in at once, showed remarkable discipline and tactical acumen. The combined arms approach, using archers to soften up the enemy whilst infantry held the line, then committing cavalry and elite units at decisive moments, this is sophisticated Bronze Age warfare at its finest. What happened to the Sea Peoples afterward remains somewhat mysterious. Some groups, like the Paliset, are believed to have settled in the Levant, and may have become the Philistines mentioned in biblical texts. Others disappeared from historical records entirely, their ultimate fate unknown. The coalition that had terrorized the Mediterranean world fragmented, and the threat they posed gradually diminished. But the scars they left, the collapsed empires, the lost knowledge, the destroyed cities, those destroyed cities took generations to heal. So, there you have it. The Battle of the Delta, where Ramesses III faced down the apocalypse, and one pharaoh, one desperate battle, standing between civilization and total collapse. If you're absolutely buzzing about these incredible moments from ancient history, hit that like button and subscribe, because I've got loads more epic stories to share. Seriously, the ancient world was mental way more dramatic than any Netflix series. What other ancient battles or mysterious civilizations should I cover next? Drop your suggestions in the comments below. Until next time, remember, sometimes all that stands between order and chaos is one leader willing to make the hard choices and hold the line. Cheers.